On a warm August evening in 1999, a China Airlines flight from Bangkok to Taipei was making a routine stop at Hong Kong International Airport. The new airport, which had opened just 2 years earlier, was hailed as an engineering marvel, boasting state-of-the-art facilities and cutting-edge technology. However, on this fateful day, the weather conditions would put the airport's capabilities to the test, leading to one of the most harrowing aviation incidents in Hong Kong's history. Our story begins on the morning of August 22, 1999. The MD-11 aircraft, registered B-150, sat on the tarmac at Bangkok International Airport in Thailand. It was a routine flight, one of countless journeys made by China Airlines between Bangkok and Hong Kong each year. Yet this day would prove to be anything but routine. As the 315 souls on board settled into their seats, little did they know that their lives were about to change forever. Among them were businessmen returning from deals in Southeast Asia, families embarking on vacations, and crew members simply doing their job. Each had their own story, their own reason for being on Flight 642 that fateful day. The flight crew, led by Captain Gerardo Letich, an experienced pilot with over 4,500 hours of flight time, went through their pre-flight checklist. The weather report showed a tropical storm named Sam approaching Hong Kong, but such conditions were not uncommon for the region in August. The crew felt confident in their ability to navigate the challenging weather. At 11:00 a.m. local time, China Airlines Flight 642 lifted off from Bangkok, climbing into the hazy sky above the bustling Thai capital. For the first few hours, the flight proceeded normally. Passengers dozed, read books, or watched the in-flight entertainment. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisles, serving meals and attending to passenger needs. As the aircraft approached Hong Kong airspace, however, the situation began to change. The pilots received updated weather information, indicating that Tropical Storm Sam had intensified. Strong winds and heavy rain were battering Hong Kong International Airport, which had only opened the previous month on the island of Chek Lap Kok. Captain Letich and his crew closely monitored the weather conditions as they began their descent towards Hong Kong. The airport was operating under a Typhoon 8 warning, the third highest level in Hong Kong's storm warning system. This meant that conditions were severe, but landings were still permitted at the pilot's discretion. As Flight 642 emerged from the cloud cover on its final approach, the full fury of the storm became apparent. Rain lashed against the cockpit windows, while powerful gusts of wind buffeted the aircraft. Visibility was severely limited, forcing the pilots to rely heavily on their instruments. The MD-11's wheels touched down on runway 25L at 6:43 p.m. local time. But this was no ordinary landing. As soon as the main landing gear made contact with the rain-slicked runway, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. The aircraft began to veer to the right, despite the pilot's attempts to keep it aligned with the center of the runway. The strong crosswind, gusting up to 40 knots, was pushing against the plane's fuselage with tremendous force. For a brief moment, the right wing lifted, and the left wing dipped dangerously close to the ground. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Captain Letich applied full left rudder and asymmetrical reverse thrust. But it was too late. The left wing struck the ground, and the nightmare truly began. The impact sheared off the left wing, igniting the fuel tanks and sending a fireball racing along the side of the aircraft. Inside the cabin, passengers and crew were thrown violently in their seats as the plane careened off the runway. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds, but for those on board, it must have felt like an eternity. The aircraft rolled over onto its back, sliding along the grass beside the runway. The fuselage broke into 3 sections, scattering debris and passengers across the rain-soaked field. As the shattered remnants of Flight 642 finally came to rest, an eerie silence fell, broken only by the sound of the howling wind and the crackling of flames. Then, the air was filled with the screams and cries of the injured and the terrified. In the chaotic aftermath of the crash, survival instincts kicked in. Those passengers who were able began to unbuckle their seatbelts and search for ways out of the wreckage. Some crawled through gaps in the broken fuselage, while others were ejected from the plane during the violent roll. Emergency response teams at Hong Kong International Airport sprang into action as soon as they realized what had happened. Despite the treacherous weather conditions, firefighters, paramedics and police rushed to the crash site. Scene that greeted them was one of utter devastation. Pieces of the aircraft were strewn across a wide area, some still burning fiercely. Injured passengers stumbled away from the wreckage, while others remained trapped inside. The rescue operation that unfolded over the next few hours was nothing short of heroic. Emergency workers battled against time, the elements, and the risk of further explosions to save as many lives as possible. Firefighters worked tirelessly to extinguish the flames and prevent them from spreading to other parts of the wreckage where survivors might still be trapped. Paramedics treated the injured, providing life-saving treatment on the spot and preparing the most critical cases for immediate evacuation to nearby hospitals. Inside the broken fuselage, passengers who had survived the initial impact faced a new set of challenges. Some were pinned by debris or trapped in seats that had been wrenched from their moorings. Others found themselves hanging upside down, held in place only by their seatbelts. One such hero was a young flight attendant named Yao Yijun. Despite suffering a broken arm in the crash, Yao helped numerous passengers escape from the burning wreckage. Her actions would later earn her widespread praise and recognition. As news of the crash spread, the world held its breath. Initial reports painted a grim picture, with fears that there could be hundreds of casualties. Families of those on board gathered at airports in Bangkok and Hong Kong, desperate for any information about their loved ones. Of the 315 people on the aircraft, 312 managed to escape with their lives. While many were injured, some seriously, the fact that only 3 lives were lost in such a catastrophic crash was nothing short of miraculous. The survival rate of over 99% made China Airlines Flight 642 one of the most survivable crashes in aviation history. But this statistic, impressive as it is, doesn't tell the full story of the physical and emotional toll on those involved. In the days and weeks that followed, investigators from Hong Kong's Civil Aviation Department, aided by experts from around the world, began the painstaking process of piecing together what had gone wrong. The investigation focused on several key areas: the decision to attempt a landing in such severe weather conditions, the performance of the aircraft during the landing, and the actions of the flight crew in the crucial moments before and after touchdown. Investigators pored over flight data recorders, cockpit voice recordings, weather reports, and eyewitness accounts. They examined every piece of wreckage, looking for clues that might explain why the landing had gone so catastrophically wrong. The decision to keep the airport operational was based on established protocols and the belief that modern aircraft and well-trained pilots could safely handle the conditions. However, the crash of Flight 642 would prompt a re-evaluation of these policies. Attention then turned to the actions of the flight crew. Captain Lettish and his co-pilots were experienced aviators, but they found themselves in an extremely challenging situation. The strong crosswinds and heavy rain made for a difficult approach, requiring precise control and split-second decision-making. The cockpit voice recorder revealed the tension in the cockpit as the pilots struggled to keep the aircraft on course during the final approach. In the last moments before touchdown, there were discussions about the aircraft's speed and alignment with the runway. Investigators determined that the MD-11 had touched down harder than normal and slightly to the right of the runway centerline. This, combined with the strong crosswind, set in motion the chain of events that led to the loss of control. The design of the MD-11 itself came under scrutiny. Some experts pointed out that the aircraft had a history of difficult handling characteristics during landing, particularly in crosswind conditions. The placement of its wings and landing gear made it susceptible to a phenomenon known as pilot-induced oscillation, where overcorrection by the pilots could exacerbate control problems. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that there was no single cause for the crash of Flight 642. Rather, it was a combination of factors: the severe weather, the challenging characteristics of the MD-11, and the split-second decisions made in the cockpit that had come together to create a perfect storm. The final report, issued by the Hong Kong Accident Investigation Authority, pointed to a combination of factors that contributed to the disaster. The primary cause was identified as pilot error, specifically the inability to arrest the aircraft's high rate of descent during the final moments of the approach. The report noted that the crew had made the decision to land at Hong Kong despite several earlier flights having carried out missed approaches or diversions due to the adverse weather conditions. The landing weight of the aircraft, which was nearly at its maximum, also played a role, reducing the aircraft's ability to recover from the high rate of descent. Additionally, the investigation revealed that the loss of the headwind component and the early retardation of the engines contributed to a 20-knot drop in indicated airspeed just before touchdown, further compounding the crew's challenges. The report also praised the actions of the emergency responders and the airport's disaster preparedness, which had undoubtedly saved many lives. The crew members of Flight 642, particularly those who had assisted in the evacuation, were hailed as heroes. Their actions in the chaotic aftermath of the crash had undoubtedly saved lives. Many received commendations and awards for their bravery. Flight attendant Yao Yijun, who had helped so many passengers despite her own injuries, became a symbol of the courage displayed that day. Her story inspired many and highlighted the crucial role that well-trained cabin crew play in aviation safety. For China Airlines, the crash of Flight 642 was a wake-up call. While the airline had experienced several accidents in the 1990s, none had been as high-profile or as miraculously survivable as this one. The incident led to a comprehensive review of the airline's safety procedures and pilot training programs. For those who lived through it, the memories of Flight 642 will never fade. The terror of those moments when the plane careened off the runway, the relief of survival, and the long journey of recovery that followed have left an indelible mark on their lives. In the words often attributed to the great aviator Charles Lindbergh, "Life is like a landscape. You live in the midst of it, but can describe it only from the vantage point of distance." From the vantage point of years, the landscape of China Airlines Flight 642 is one of tragedy and triumph, of disaster and deliverance. It is a landscape that continues to shape the contours of aviation safety and human resilience.